The Convocation is sponsored as part of our Fall Fest week of activities. I hope that you all have been participating in other things and have looked at the schedule. We have lots of things going on this week as part of the Fall Fest. Today we are especially glad to have this convocation sponsored by West Central Public Health. And I'm going to introduce Ms. Patricia Williams, who's an alum of Georgia Southwestern, who sponsored, her organization has sponsored this event. So she's going to come up and introduce to you our speakers for today. Thank you for being here. Also, when you comes up, if you are here for hurricane happenings points to scan in, if you're assigned for a class, and you didn't sign a roster, or if you are in competition to earn points for Fall Fest, please see the hurricane happenings thing on the bathroom doors and on the exterior door that way. So scan it on your way out. Okay, thank you. I also have a gift to give Ms. Williams.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be back in the house of GSW. I am a graduate of Georgia Southwestern State University back in middle 90s. I was leaving at that. And it's so good to be back on this campus. It brings back so many wonderful memories. It's good to see Miss Kada. I remember Miss LK years ago. She was one of the influential people in my life. And also Miss Pamela Leverett. She used to be Christmas. So it's good to see her as well. And also my best friend, Miss Miranda Thomas. Where is Miss Miranda Thomas? She's also here. Great. Glad to see all of you. So welcome today. Today's event is going to be powerful. It's going to be moving. And I'm so excited about this person, these speakers that we have here today, because the information that they're going to present to you can be life-changing. So I want you to really listen to what they've got to say. I want you to count. If you have questions afterwards, if you have an opportunity, please come forward with any questions. As I said, this is very dear to my heart because I have a passion for young people. I've been working with young people for almost 18 years now. Well, actually 17 years now. And because of that, I really want to make sure that we are preparing our young people to become our future leaders. Because when we get older, we'll need y'all to step into our shoes. Are y'all excited about today?
All right.
All right. What we have today is our presentation on alcohol. How many people have dealt with alcohol? Maybe a family member or maybe a friend. How many people deal with it on a daily basis? Okay. How many people know people who are truly alcoholics? Okay. How many people realize how devastating alcohol is and the effects of it? Okay. How many people have actually had an opportunity to purchase alcohol? Have you seen or know of people who purchase alcohol without even having a valid driver's license? Fake IDs. How often is alcohol at parties? Is it often at parties? Very easy. Is it difficult for teenagers to get alcohol? No, it's not. As I said, today's message will hit home for just about everybody in this building, whether you've been impacted with it individually or through your family. So really, I want you to pay attention to listen up what we have to say. Our speakers are dynamic. I heard them years ago, and I'm excited about them coming and giving this information with you. So I want you to please be respectful of their time because this is very dear to their hearts as well. This is a personal story. We have our speaker. One is Chris Sandy, and also Eric Krug. Eric over here in the lime green, he's always blinged out. We're excited to have them. So if you will, they're going to introduce themselves as a part of their presentation. So if you please, give them a hand for our speaker, Chris Sandy and Eric Krug.
I'm certainly thankful for the opportunity to be here today. I am Chris Sandy. Right over here is Eric Krug. For both of us, we're not the type of speakers that go around and tell people don't do this and don't do that. We all know it's ultimately up to you to make choices in life, but we are very hopeful that what we have to share with you today is something that will help you as you move forward. Now, I don't know how all of you would feel about telling people your biggest mistake in life, but I'm going to tell you that it's very, very hard. And going through and reliving something in your past that you hate, it can become very emotional and very difficult. But yet for Eric and I, for both of us, we do feel it's very important. Like I said, this is like our passion, and we're really hoping that when you walk out of here today, every one of you will understand why we share our stories. There's multiple messages here. It's not just about drinking and driving or anything like that. It's bigger than that. And I hope that you see that and feel that once you walk out of here as you go on with your life. Okay, so when I made this choice, I was 22 years old. It's not like I was much older than anyone else here. And, life is all about making decisions and choices. We all know this. Now, I know what happens when you make good choices in life. I also know what happens if you make the wrong choices in life. This was a picture taken of me in 2004. I know because of where you're located at, you've seen plenty of people in uniforms just like this, so I certainly have a story to tell you about this. So at 22 years old, because of the choice I made, I spent 3,117 days in a Georgia State prison. That's 8.5 years. So for 8.5 years, I promise you, I was not a human being anymore. I was an inmate, a state prisoner, a convict, whatever you want to call it. My number was 108-3688. Now, I certainly deserve to be in there because of what I did. You see, the choice that I made when I was 22 caused the lives of two wonderful people. They are now dead because of what I did. And there is nothing I can ever do or say in my entire lifetime that's going to change what I did. That's why I said it's really hard to put this into words. But I will do the best that I can. At 22 years old, I felt like everything was going right. I had loved hanging out with my friends, my family, had a lot of things to look forward to. But on April 11th of 2000, on that night, that is when I made this choice. I remember I was at this small little party. At this party, I had 4 big drinks back to back to back to back. Then I got a phone call from some of my friends. They were down the road at another party. Well, everyone I knew was going to this other party. So as soon as I got the phone call, I told my friends I'd be over in just a little bit. My friend Jesse and I that were at the party, we left out. I got into the driver's seat. Jesse, he came around and got into the passenger seat, and then we drove off. Except we never made it to the other party. Now, I was driving on this road that was somewhat in the country. I knew this road very, very well. I remember it so vividly. It goes from 45 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour. And I remember I came up on a stop sign. You make a right-hand turn at the end of the road. That's where my friends lived at. It was just a little 2-lane road. Now, something about this road, because it was way out in the country, my friends and I, we used to fly up and down it all the time when we were going back and forth from my house to my friend's house. So that night that I was driving down this road, I remember I'm driving down the road, I have my radio crunked, Jesse and I, we're cutting up, we're laughing, and I'm starting to get into a hurry, so I'm going about 80 miles an hour. So now as I'm flying down this road, all of a sudden I drive up onto a white minivan. They're right in front of me. So I look over at my friend Jesse, I look back at the road, and I decide, man, I'm just going to blow past them. So as I start passing them, I notice that there's this oncoming vehicle down the road a little ways. They have their left-hand turn signal on. It's a car in the other lane coming in my direction. But I could clearly tell that they're ready to turn across the road to go into a driveway. So I immediately start getting back over to my lane. But as I'm getting back over to my lane, all of a sudden I see this gold flash shoot in front of my face. Then bang! I hear this incredibly loud and solid sound. Then everything went black. Now, after several seconds had passed, I could not actually see anything yet. But I started to hear my tires slowly roll off the edge of the road. Now, as soon as they came to a stop, that's when I opened my eyes and I found myself pinned on the passenger side dashboard up against the glass. I could barely even breathe. I have absolutely no idea how in the world I got out of my car. But I do remember there was a moment where I was crawling in the middle of the road. And then I had to stop. The reason I had to stop is my right leg had been dislocated from my hip and it pushed around on my back. And where my knee had slammed into the dashboard and ripped out, it was bleeding severely. So because of the pain, naturally, I started to fall in and out of consciousness. Now, the next time that I regained my consciousness, there was this officer who was standing over me. He immediately let me know that life flight was on their way. He also said that he needed to ask me a few questions before they airlifted me away. He looked over at me and he said, son, can you tell me how fast you were going? On the back of my mind, I already knew I was going way too fast for this road, and I did not want to get into any more trouble than I was probably going to be in. So I looked over at him and I said, no, sir. He said, well, is there somebody that I can contact for you? This is very serious. The first person that came to my mind, it was my mom. So I gave her my mom's name and number. But then that officer, he got really close to me. And when he did, he leaned in and he said, have you been drinking? On my mind, of course I've been drinking. I slammed those 4 drinks right before I jumped into my car. But I did not want to go to jail. I was already thinking it was bad enough that our night was ruined, my car was crashed. But as I'm lying there, so worried about what's going to happen, or worried about what happened to my car, I actually hear someone in the background. So I look over at the officer and I tell him, no, sir, but as soon as I said that, in the background I hear someone yell, there's a fatality on the scene. There's a fatality on the scene. And those words I will not forget for the rest of my life. Because as soon as I heard them, I realized right then and there that I just killed someone. I could not even believe that something like this was happening. You know what? I actually laid there and prayed to God, hoping that the next time I closed my eyes and opened them up, I was hoping everything would just go away. You know, everybody in here has had something bad happen in their life. And so if something bad happens, you know, you're just hoping that you can lay down and you're wanting the next day somehow for everything to get better. Well, I know for me, because of what I did the next day, when I opened my eyes and I looked around, I noticed I was laying in a hospital bed in a hospital room. I knew there was no way this could get any better. Matter of fact, it got much worse. My friend Carrie was one of the first people to come visit me. As soon as she came into the room right after I woke, she gave me a hug, she sat down, and then she proceeded to tell me what happened. She said that in the other car, the one that I hit, there was 2 people in it, and that both of them were dead. Now, when I was released from the hospital, I had plenty of time to read articles and stuff that was written about this night, about what I did. And I remember reading across something that said that I was driving down this back road, passing this white minivan, and it said as I was trying to get back over to my lane, the oncoming vehicle, you know, the one with the left-hand turn signal on, it was a big 4-door sedan. They tried to make a left-hand turn into a driveway, and as soon as they made that turn in the driveway, I'd already started partying that night. I was going too fast. I could not stop. And I plowed right into the rear passenger door, completely cutting the car in half. Now, leaving the front half around the driveway, but the back half was ripped off that vehicle and drug another 100 feet down the road with my car. There's no way I could ever forget the car that I hit. It was an older car. It was a 1984 Ford LTD, golden color. This is the front half of their car. I hit him going approximately 77 miles an hour. This is the rear half of their vehicle. And then right here. This picture's pretty clear, so I'm sure all of you can see this. But right here, it's a black purse. I most definitely know who that purse belonged to. See, that's a picture showing right where my car entered, right where I drove through. The person that was sitting in the passenger seat, her name is Mrs. Nellie King. She died on impact. Her husband was the driver, Mr. William King. He and we were life-flighted to Atlanta Medical Center. And after his first surgery, Mr. King, he died too. I did not know who the King family was. But I certainly found out a lot about them. I found out that they were in the early 70s. I found out that they were incredible people in the community. I also found out that they had a daughter named Susan, and they even had a granddaughter named Tara. Now, Tara was about 12 years old when I caused this crash. I am here to definitely tell you that for the rest of my life when I wake up, every single day, I always know that I'm responsible for killing her parents or her grandparents because of what I did. And I'm telling you, there is nothing that is ever going to make that go away. I wish I could take that whole night back, but I can't. Once I was released from the hospital, not much longer after that, I was charged and arrested. I was charged and arrested for 2 counts of vehicular homicide by DUI because my blood alcohol level was 0.14. I really hate admitting this fact to everybody, but when I was sitting where all of you are, and if my friends and I were out having a good time, partying with each other, wherever we were going to hang out, if someone had 3 or 4 beers and they wanted to go to another party or pick up their girlfriend or just go out and do something different, you know what? None of us thought it was that big of a deal. You know, even when I was sitting where you are, I even had designated drivers. We did have people that would sometimes give up their night, but if, you know, someone said they were okay to drive, none of us thought it was that big of a deal. But sure enough, at 22 years old, so there I am kicking it at that party, and I have these 4 drinks back to back to back. Honestly, I felt like my night just started. But I was at 0.14, which is almost double the legal limit. That's not how it just started. And my night was ended. So after I was charged and arrested, my family, they're the ones that came and posted my bond. So just so all of you understand what that meant that my family, they were able to come and get me out of the county jail, and then I was able to go back to their house, and I remained there for almost 1 year waiting to go to court. So let me just give you a little insight on this. After my parents came and got me, and I went back to the house, for the next year I actually saw what this choice was going to ultimately do to my family. Now, I'm proud to tell everybody here and anybody I ever meet, I love my family. I come from a very close family. I've always had great parents. I even have an amazing little sister. My parents had been married for 30 years when I made this choice. Just so you understand, my parents felt like they failed. They had a lot of problems go on because of what I did. They shortly after there was divorced. A lot of things happened and transpired. You see, this choice I made, it ruined my family's life too. Even my little sister, don't know if any of you have any siblings or not. My sister was 5 years younger than me. She was a senior in high school when I made this choice. My sister used to idolize me. See, I love playing football, love playing sports. And I remember my sister, she was there for me for everything. And I was her big brother, so she was always looking up to me. But after I made that choice that night and all the aftermath that followed, between my family getting ripped apart, between me going to prison, all these different factors, my sister has never looked at me the same. I'm not going to say that my sister doesn't love me. We are family. But I am also going to tell you that it will never, ever be the same because of what I did. And you know what? God knows what the victim's family must go through every single day of their life because of what I did. Once this year was over with, it was April 10th, 2001. I went to court. I was then sentenced to serve 13 years in prison and 17 years on probation. Once the judge read that sentence off to me, you know what? He gave me a moment to speak. The reason being is when I was in the courtroom, of course, I had my family and all of my friends on one side, but on the other side of the courtroom was the entire victim's family. And you know what? I did not mean for this to happen. And I turned around and I absolutely tried my hardest to apologize for what I did. But simply put, there was nothing I could say that would change what I did to him. And when I was done, the deputies came in the courtroom, they handcuffed me, and they drugged me out of that courtroom. And to me, that was the last moment of complete freedom. Now, the first prison that I was sent to was this prison right here. I brought this picture for a couple of different reasons. It is from the first prison I was housed at over at Jackson. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jackson or not, but Jackson is a state prison here in Georgia that houses all the death row inmates. There's a little over 2,000 people there. It is a maximum security prison. So I don't know how you feel about life and where you're at in your mind, but when I was sitting where you are, I could never even imagine spending 1 hour inside a cell like this. I could not even imagine setting foot inside a prison. So Just to give you an idea, the day came when I was at the county jail. We're in our orange jumpsuits, and these officers come in and they let us know that we're getting ready to be shipped off to this other prison, which is going to be Jackson. And they come in there and they put these belly chains around us. They put leg shackles on our feet, and then they handcuff us. Then they load us up on a bus. And then all of a sudden we head towards Jackson. Now when we pull up to this prison, I have to tell you, man, there's no doubt in my mind, I was absolutely scared to death. We pull up to that prison. It was so huge. There was all this razor wire fence on the outside, guard towers placed all the way around it. The gates came open, the bus pulled forward, we unloaded off the bus. But as soon as we unloaded off this bus, there were all these correctional officers standing outside waiting for us. They start screaming and shouting at us, and they herd us into this room, literally almost pushing us into the room. We get to this room, it's the intake room. Everyone has to be processed through this. As soon as I go in there, there's 4 yellow lines in this small room. We have to step on the yellow lines. We strip butt naked. We go into a shower. They spray us with this stuff that delices us because of the nasty stuff you can pick up from other people in jail. Then you get back on the yellow lines, get dressed in a white jumpsuit, a pair of boots. They sit you down. There's 4 chairs. They shave your hair off your head, and then they send you out for some more testing. And after this long, long day, they eventually assign you to a cell block or a dorm. Just to give you an idea, that's of course what a guy goes through. Not too long ago, I met this girl named Linda McJunkin. She was she graduated and went to Georgia Tech University. Linda has also set several track records there at Georgia Tech. She had a really good collegiate career there. Shortly after her stay at Georgia Tech, she was hanging out with some of her girlfriends. They were drinking in Atlanta. And when she left out of the bar, she got in her car and she drove and got off on the wrong exit. She ended up hitting a car head on. And when she did, it killed the 2 people that were inside. They were both 21 years old. Linda had never been in trouble in her entire life. She was a very pretty girl. And I have to tell you that when she went to go before the judge, he most definitely sentenced her. She went to prison just like me. Now, I met her after she was out of prison, and she told me what I just shared with you is the same thing she went through. Only difference was they didn't shave her hair, but it's still the same experience. So now something else I found out when I went to Jackson. Here in Georgia, if you have alcohol or drugs in your system and you cause a crash that causes an injury or kills somebody, you are automatically considered a violent offender. So when I first stepped foot into prison, I was classified as a level 5. So therefore, I was sent to F House. So this is a picture from one of the cell houses over in F House. The deal with F House is when you're sent here, you're to be locked in a little 2-man cell, and you're to remain in that cell 23 hours a day. So I know for me, I was sent all the way up to cell 225, which was at the very top. So I remember I walk up into this area, and I'm standing in front of the cell. This correctional officer downstairs hit a button. That cell door came open. So I stepped inside, and he started screaming and shouting at me to shut the door. So I immediately shut the door. But at that moment, it felt like it was so loud inside there. I felt like I was going crazy. It wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't like people were screaming and shouting at me. It was just the mere fact there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people screaming and shouting down the range, upstairs, to the side, beating on lockers. It was so loud it took me a while to gather my thoughts. But it's not like I had much time to think about it, because I also knew as I'm locked down in this little tiny cell that I have to share it with someone else. Now, of course, this guy that's sitting on the bottom bunk, he's a lot older than me. I was 23 years old when I first was in there. And he probably was at least 3 times my age. But he didn't care why I was in there. I didn't care why he was in there. We just knew we had to share the space a lot. So I went in and I talked to him a little bit. And eventually, I just jumped up on the top bunk and I lied down. Well, as they do every single night in prison, at the end of the night, they turn the lights down. So as soon as they turned the lights down, that night I felt like everything fell dead silent. So it was like the first time that day I could actually think again. But as I laid up there in that bunk, all I could think about was how this was my first night in prison and how there's a good chance I have another 4,745 days to go. You know, I would never expect any one of you to even imagine or think what that would be like laying up in that top bunk. But just to give you a little insight on my thoughts, not only did I sit up there and think about how long I might have, But I thought about, for many days upon, of how in the world could I just end this. I hated being alive, I hated what I did, and I hated being in there. And you know what? Rightfully so, I remained in prison for another 8.5 years. I was in 3 major prisons, but they all seemed to kind of gel together because it didn't matter where I was waking up. I was always waking up in a cell similar to this. Not all of them have the steel bars. A lot of them have steel doors with little slits in them. This was, as a matter of fact, the only prison I went to that had the bars. But you know what? Out of all these different cells that I stayed in, that meant I had to share it with someone else. I'm going to tell you, some of the people I got along with just fine. Matter of fact, there were some people that were like in college. There were some people that were 19, 20, 21 years old. You know what? They had the same charges as me. So of course we kind of got along because we could understand each other's situation. But then there were some people in there that there was no way I could ever get along with. It's like you just learn to tolerate people. I remember I had this one cellmate for 2 years. His name was Gary Floyd. He'd been in prison for about 42 years at the time. He was much older than me too. But Gary, he had a really bad situation. I mean, I found out what this guy did. You know, regardless, he and I, we got along just fine, but I knew what had happened in this person's life. I knew that in 1969 it said that he went into somebody's house, he kidnapped a mother and daughter, and he executed them. And he was serving 2 consecutive sentences, 2 consecutive life sentences for what he did. He's going to die in prison. Now, I got along just fine with him, but then I had some other ones that were in my cell. I promise you, I did not get along with them. But it's not like I got to choose. You just deal with it. You don't get to choose who you share the cell with. And after finally 8.5 years had passed by, that's when I was granted parole. And I want y'all to understand, I don't feel like I'm entitled to be out of prison. I don't feel like there's an entitlement there because I served X amount of time. It has nothing to do with that. All I'm saying is after I met a required amount of time, they released me on parole, which means there is no way life will ever be the same. It's not going to ever be as bad as it was when I was inside. I certainly understand that. But now that I'm on parole and probation, I have all kinds of challenges in life. You know, for one, I'm on parole all the way until April. That'll mark a little over almost 5 years. And then after that, I will continue additional 17 years on probation. But so you understand, my parole officer, he is very hard. He's very strict. But there are some things that he's fair about. He allows me to travel out of the state as long as I get written permission from him. I have a huge fine I do have to pay. If I do not pay it, he can violate me. I also have to take random alcohol and drug tests. And then I have special conditions to my sentence that I have to complete. So give you an idea what special conditions are, because a judge can impose them on anybody. Doesn't matter where you're at. He's required me every single year that I return back to the crash site. So I will go back to where I caused this. Now this is the car I was driving that night. And so the reason I have to return is because out in front of the house where I caused this, there are 2 white crosses. So every year on April 11th, per my sentence, I have to go back and place a flower memorial. So I've done it for 4 years right now. See, I was released out on parole on August 5th of 2009. So I've been out for over 4 years. But I want you to understand, if I make one mistake between now until my sentence ends, which is April 9th, 2031, between now and 2031, I'm going straight back to prison. For the rest of my life, I will return back to the crash site on April 11th, no matter what. And then also, about that crash site, I will, for a very long time, have to find my own ride there. I can no longer drive anymore. It's a part of my condition of my sentence. I'm not saying that I will never be able to drive again. I'm just saying I've not had a valid driver's license since 2000. Now I've been out for over 4 years, still not able to drive. I may get the opportunity to have this huge privilege back sometime in 2014, 2015, or 2016. It's going to depend on what the judge agrees upon. Now, the judge has made it clear that if I was ever allowed to drive again, that he's make sure that the only way I will be able to drive to have this privilege is if I have an ignition interlock system installed in my car. Now, this is going to be a big thing that's spreading everywhere. It's probably one of the smarter things. I probably am not going to like it, but I also know how much of a burden it is not to have a license. I know how much of a privilege it is to have one. But the ignition interlock system is a breathalyzer. They install it in your car. It's the only car you can drive, and you have to blow into a device, it's a breathalyzer, to start it, and you also have to blow in it to keep it running. And it's about $75 to $150 a month, depending on what company you use. That will remain in my car for a long time, but once again, if I could have that huge privilege back, it would be just unbelievable. Because not being able to drive makes life very difficult. Now I'm going to tell you something. I have had the opportunity to go and share my story and Eric's story to a lot of different places. All right, we do this. This is our passion. This is what we believe in. And we certainly want to help anybody that we can ever encounter, no matter where that may be. And I do understand, though, from all the different places that I've visited, that there are two huge questions that have always gotten asked to me. So I want to make sure that I tell you these two things before I move on to Eric's story. The first question that I always get asked is, what happened to my friend Jesse? You know, my friend that was riding in the car with me. Well, of course, that's a really important question. I'm glad it's always been asked because, you know, Jesse and I, we were like best friends. And I know that that night, Jesse and I, you know, were cutting up and laughing as we always do. I mean, there's not one person in this room that could not get along with Jesse. He was funny. He was just one of those types of people. Everyone was, you know, gravitated towards him. And so, you know, Jesse and I know that night when I have the radio up and we're cutting up and laughing, there I am flying down the road, and right before I'm passing the car, I remember Jesse telling me about a couple of girls that are at this party, and he said something, and, you know, unfortunately I can't tell you what he said, but it was really funny at the time, and I'm laughing. You know, we're just a couple of guys, and we passed this white minivan. Well, you know, we also, neither one of us had our seatbelts on. I don't know, we didn't ever wear them then, we didn't think it was that big of a deal, whatever. But when I passed this white minivan, I remember seeing Jesse reach up and he grabbed the seatbelt. And when he grabbed the seatbelt right here, I caught it in the corner of my eye. And of course, there I go again, just thinking Jesse's playing around, joking, you know, telling me to slow down a little bit, whatever he's doing. But as soon as I look back at the road, all I can do is grab onto the steering wheel and I drive right through the other car. Jesse, he later on told me exactly what happened. He said that right before we hit, he somehow was able to buckle his seatbelt in. He really has no earthly idea how he did it. He just knows that it snapped right when we hit. He said then he was conscious for the rest of the night. And that choice I made had a huge impact on his life. You see, Jesse heard me screaming in the middle of the road. He heard everything else that was going on, from the people running around to the other car, looking and checking for other people. And Jesse said he was so scared, he didn't know if he was supposed to run out and help me, if he was supposed to run and leave the scene. He just didn't know what to do. And, you know, Jesse and I, we're still friends. We're not like best friends like we used to be, but we are friends. He made it clear to me that he's not mad at me whatsoever. He felt like it could have been him that night driving. But since I've been out, over the last 4 years, we've hung out 3 times. All 3 times that we hung out, all we could do is talk about that night. Jesse doesn't want to think about that night. He hates talking about it. But it's like we can't help it. So, you know, we just stopped hanging out. Now, I guess we play it the safe way. The only way we talk is we send each other a text message. We're not on Facebook. We're not on Twitter with each other. Nothing like that. We just text. But in the end, I am just personally grateful I did not kill my friend too. Now, another question that has gotten asked, I remember the first time I got asked, it was at a high school. There was this guy in the very, very back, and he's raising his hand, and he's ready to be answered. And of course, we're doing this Q&A session. And so this guy, and you can already envision, you know what it's like from high school. It's a big difference between there and here. So, you know, he's raising his hand, and he looks at me, and he says, "Hey, man, can you tell me, what was your worst experience in prison?" Oh my gosh, do you know what he was probably insinuating, right? You all know, come on, man, you've heard rumors about prison. There's no way you haven't. So, I remember when he asked me this, I didn't know if I was supposed to take it serious or not. But really, when I thought about it, it was a very legitimate question. Because you know what? When I was sitting where he was, man, I would have thought the same thing too. I mean, I've already heard rumors about prison. Everyone in here has. I mean, you have a prison not very far from here. I know you all have heard about things. So I'm just going to say this. After being in prison for 8.5 years, I've learned that there is never a way for someone to get out of prison and truly explain what happens inside. There is no way to share what that culture is like. And two, I'm so thankful when I got out of prison because of all the stuff I saw, that I had not been beaten down or something physically bad happened to me while I was in there. Although I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I was never in a fight in prison, because that's like the culture of being in there. It happens. I'm just glad that it never escalated to something much worse. Now, my worst experience, it had nothing to do with any of that. To give you an idea, my worst experience, it happened on November. It was November 22nd, 2007. I found out that I was actually going to be eligible for parole within the next couple of years. It was a pretty big moment. November 22nd also marked Thanksgiving. In prison, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you can have visits on the holidays, you can have visits on the weekend. If you get in trouble, they take that away or they put you in a hole, whatever it might be. I did everything I was supposed to do. I knew I was getting a visit on this day. Now, during visitation, I was having my mom, my dad, my little sister was even coming. She brought her son, little Christopher. Eric Krug, who's over here, he even attended. I did not know Eric before any of this. It's going to be a whole different part of the story I'm going to share in a minute, but Eric, he was there. Him and his sister came. And I remember, and Eric, right, when you came to visit me in prison, that was like the last place you wanted to be, correct? But I knew for me that when my family came in, of course, they had to come into the prison. They had to go through the metal detectors. They're treated a little differently. They're told where to sit. Once my family's in there, this last place I was at was real strict. We had a strip search going in, strip search coming out. But once we got into visitation, I was allowed to hug everyone one time at the beginning and one time at the end. So of course, as soon as I get in, I hug everybody, and then all of a sudden I sit down. Now when I sit down, I sit right across from my dad. And we have this little white table, plastic table that's separating us. But my dad, he immediately jumps up. And when he jumps up, I notice he has a Ziploc bag. He has $20 worth of change. That's how much you could bring in. And the reason you could bring it in is because they had 5 vending machines. My dad, immediately, it's being Thanksgiving, he goes right over to the vending machines. He starts buying these candy bars, these chips, frozen sandwiches, these Cokes. And he comes over and this little tiny table and he starts stacking all that food up on top of this table. And I took a look around the room and I thought, oh my gosh, we look like the biggest rednecks ever. And my dad laughing and he thinks he's so funny, and you know how your parents can be, right? So anyways, my dad was really just trying to lighten up the thing. Of course, he was, being obnoxious about it, but my dad and I have to tell you something. And I have to tell you, I hate saying this, but when I was inside prison, I had never, ever been as close to my dad in my whole life. When I was in my early teens, of course, my dad and I, we have like 2 major things in common. We love football and fishing. So I did hang out with my dad then, but when I got a little older, I spent a lot of time with my friends, and I thought my dad didn't know what he was talking about. Then all of a sudden I caused this crash, and then my dad, even though with the turmoil with my mom and dad, what was going on, they all stood by my side. And over that time, I have never been closer to him in my whole life. Now, something else I realized while I was sitting up in this visitation on Thanksgiving, had a lot of things to be thankful for. I thought about what I put my family through. You see, I've shared some of it, but I also want to share this. You know that red car that I showed earlier? That was my car. My mom and dad, they had put their name on it. They signed for it when I got it. I made the payments on it, but regardless, when I caused this crash, because their name was on the title, I hope all of you understand my parents were sued. And I ruined their lives in a lot of different ways, financially, emotionally. So when I'm sitting up there on Thanksgiving, I'm thinking to myself, man, I promise that when I get out of here, I'm going to spend more time with my family. I'm going to go to football games with my dad. I'm going to take him to a Falcons game. I'm going to go, we're going to go spend some time fishing together. Man, I owe my whole family. They sacrificed everything for me when I was inside. And so at the end of the visitation, I get up and I shake my dad's hand and I give him a hug. And I hug everybody else and they all leave out. And then for me, I was placed back in the cell block. They had count time or something come up. I was put inside the cell, and then I was locked down. In the middle of this moment, it was a couple hours later, an officer came and he got me out of the cell. And when he grabbed me out of the cell, he told me, "Inmate Sandy, you need to come with me. We need to go right now." And he got me, and everybody in the cell block, of course, thought I had done something wrong. They're like, "Ooh, Sandy's in trouble, man. He did something at visitation." And, everyone's gawking and this stuff. And, I already knew. When I was inside prison, I did everything I was supposed to do. Man, I just knew that when I got out, I needed to make sure I did everything right. So I did everything I could to my best ability while I was in. So I knew I was not in trouble for anything. But that officer, he took me and he escorted me back to visitation. Now, as soon as I entered the visitation, it's an empty room. There were chairs all out and tables before, now it's empty. And I'm sitting in there in visitation, all of a sudden the steel door comes open, and then my mom comes in. And Eric's sister was holding my mom. And she comes walking in. They just don't let your visitors come back into prison. And so she came back in, and she said she needed to share something with me. She said that when they climbed into the car, and as they were pulling away from the prison, my dad, he started having some chest pain. So my sister was sitting in the back seat, and she just told me she jumped out of the car, and she grabbed my dad and pulled him out, and she started giving him CPR. My dad, he had a massive heart attack, and my dad, who I love very much, he died right then. And so that's why they let my mom back in. It was Thanksgiving, they were just there at visitation. I'm going to say something. No matter where I would have been in my life, of course it would have been hard to hear something like that. But when I heard those words right then, I knew that there would be no way I could ever make up for what I did. It's not like I could go take my dad fishing again, or I could go spend time with them. I knew ultimately it came down to that I wasted all those years when I should have been outside with my family. And it absolutely defined the worst experience inside my prison. Because when you experience a failure like that, it is something that you can never get off of you. I do miss my dad a whole bunch. I hate that I wasted all that time inside prison, and I hate what I did to the victim's family. And it does not matter how many times I tell people what this experience is like, it will never, ever get easier. The only reason I shared it is because each one of you, please understand there's a lot of consequences in life. And you do have to be careful with the choices you make. I had the opportunity while I was inside prison to meet Eric. And it was underneath very extreme circumstances. So I want you to have an idea. One is Eric is actually a victim of a DUI crash. He was a passenger, and he was also the all-star athlete in high school and in college. And things have obviously changed for him. When I was inside prison, Eric had heard about my story. There's a little bit more to it. I was in a program. There were some things going on. Eric heard about what my goals and ambitions were. His whole family did, and they quite frankly questioned all of it because of what Eric was going through. But they set up a meeting at the prison, or just outside. So Eric and his mom came and visited me, and I thought it was going to be the worst visit possible. I agreed to it, but I was scared. And Eric ended up that day, right, you gave me a hug and you told me you forgave me for what I did. And anyways, he became like my best friend. And his whole family then went on to visit me almost every single weekend for the next 4 years until I was released. Eric has become absolutely the biggest inspiration in my life. He's just an amazing person. And I promise you, you'll understand why as we go through his story. Now, there are some difficulties here. Eric, because of his injuries, he cannot talk. So he has a couple ways he can communicate. One is through this board right here. It has letters, words, numbers on it. It makes it really hard to follow though, right? He also has sign language, although it's Eric's sign language, so none of you would get it. I hardly get it sometimes, but it works, doesn't it? But the best thing that's helped him out is 4 years ago when the iPad came out, he decided to make the investment to go get one, and it's paid off for him big time. So on this iPad, it's given him the ability to start talking again, right, Eric? And I know, for an example, we were up in Dalton, Georgia a few weeks ago, and I remember we were at the Marriott Hotel, and I had left to go in to use the bathroom, and he was out on his walker, and he had his iPad sitting up on top of it, and I was like in there, just in and out, like super fast. But as soon as I come out, all of a sudden there's like 6 or 7 girls standing around Eric, and man, that guy is tapping so fast, he's just typing away, and everybody's laughing around him. And so what he likes is on the iPad, he can change the voice. So he thought, man, he'd go British on him. And he thought the girls would really dig that, right? So he likes to have some fun with it because now he gets to use some of his personality. Now, it does take a little while for him to type unless he gets into that moment and he knows he's got a lot of girls like right on top of him. He's ready to type fast. So I'm going to tell you, right, Eric, he had to kind of pre-type a message here for you. I want to make sure you have everything down here that you need to say. Okay, and so I want to make sure Eric has the opportunity to share with you real quick, and then I will help him with some more of his message. Are you ready? Okay.
I wish I could talk without this iPad, but I cannot. I also need help from my friends and family to communicate some of my thoughts. Simple things like talking and walking are a struggle every day of my life. I had lifelong injuries because I got into a car with a drunk driver. She was my roommate's girlfriend. Now my roommate is dead and my life is all messed up. Suffering from a traumatic brain injury has ruined all of my dreams, like playing professional baseball or completing my college degree. Now, this is my never-ending nightmare which began on my 21st birthday. I wish life was different, but it is not. Heck, can you believe it? I have not gone on a real date in 16 years. So if you can hook me up with a girl my age, please holler at me after the presentation.
That's important to put in there too, isn't it? I have just found it to be incredible the way Eric has handled the whole situation. You know, to going from when he was the star athlete in high school, he went to Brookwood High School in Atlanta, it's in Gwinnett County. Then he went on to play baseball. He had a few options to choose from, but he ended up wanting to stay close to home. He was really close with his family. So he chose a small school. It's Oglethorpe University. It's a Division III school right there in Atlanta. And, Eric went on to play college baseball there. Now, Eric has always maintained a way of keeping his humor, right? And he loves making people laugh and keeping people entertained, and he has the right attitude about everything. He's never upset or mad about things. He's always patient with people. And you have to understand, for him to communicate, it is really hard for him to type and to get all of his thoughts out because people have to be patient. There are a few occasions where I've seen him type super fast, but for the most part it moves, it takes a second, doesn't it? And, I've known Eric now for 8 years, and I know him very, very well. Probably in his eyes, I hang out with him way too much. But he's like, he makes me realize that I sit there and I think how bad life is or how hard life is because of what I did. I think about what it was like in prison, what it's like since I've been out. But then I look and I see what Eric goes to every day. And I understand that what he goes to is way harder than I could ever imagine. So for him to maintain his humor, it's incredible. So I'm glad that he's given me the opportunity. I know his story extremely well. As mentioned, he was at Oglethorpe University during his junior year of college. He was voted the most valuable defensive player of the year. He also made all conference. He had a lot of great things happening in his life at that moment. His junior year also marked his 21st birthday. Here's the thing, Eric and I, we share a similar date, or share the exact same date, April 11th. April 11th was Eric's it was his 21st birthday, and this is also marks the night things happened. that also marked the same night for me. Now for Eric, on his 21st birthday, Oglethorpe played West Georgia that night. And Eric, he played second base, and then his best friend, the team captain, his roommate, Tim, he played third base. So that night, Tim and Eric, they made this double play. They closed out the game. They won. They were all excited. Him and all the teammates and his friends, his girlfriend, right? Everybody was going out to celebrate. And so the deal was, is they promised as a team together, right, that once they went out to celebrate, that they promised each other that they would all take a taxi back to campus. And they were readily available. It was right there, not far from where they were going, so they promised us. At the end of the night, Eric and his girlfriend, they're walking around and everyone's talking to each other, and then so it's time to kind of close it up. So Eric's sister grabs Eric and his girlfriend and takes them over to a taxi, and she puts them inside. As soon as she puts both of them inside, she tells them she loves them, and she says, hey, I'll meet you back over at the dorms. And so she walked back in to get some things. Now, whenever she walked away, Eric's best friend, Tim, some of his other friends, Tim's girlfriend, they walk up to the car, to the taxi, and they kind of stop him and say, hey, man, why don't you ride back with us? It's your 21st birthday. Come hang out with me, man. Come on. So Eric and his girlfriend, they get out of the taxi cab. They've been drinking all night too, so they didn't think twice about it. They get out of the taxi cab and they jump in with their friends. Well, it just happened to be that Tim's girlfriend, she was underage, but she had a fake ID and she was using it, going to the bar. So she had been drinking just like everyone else. But she said she was cool to drive. They all jumped in with her. She drove back to campus. Now, this campus was small. Matter of fact, it's not like it was the similar setup as right around here. This road that she was driving on, when she made it on a campus, it was only about 25 miles an hour. It's a slow road. It's a very slow road. But it curved around back to the dorms. And as she was curving around the dorms, she was going almost 45 miles an hour, which still is not incredibly fast. But it was fast enough that right before she got to the dorms, it was 300 yards to it, right, Eric? You could see them. She all of a sudden swerved right into some trees on the right side of the road. And when she hit these trees, it was on the passenger side. But it was with enough force that Tim, Eric's best friend, he was sitting between two people in the back seat. And when he was sitting there, he didn't have his seatbelt on. So all of a sudden, he lunged head first right into the radio, right on the dashboard. And when he hit it hard enough that it split his head open. And then the resident assistant that was there, we got to speak to her recently. She said her job was to hold Tim's head shut. And unfortunately, about 10 hours later, Tim, he died. That was Eric's best friend. At Oglethorpe University, they had a big ceremony. They retired his jersey number 17, but come on, that was his best friend. Now for Eric, he was actually in the passenger seat riding shotgun, so he had his right arm hanging out the window. This is in April. It was real nice outside. So as he has his arm hanging out the window and they slam into those trees, it catches it. It smashes it into the car. It crushes all of his bones. It shatters it. It also severs it right at the elbow. So when the doctors were dealing with his injuries, they did reattach his arm and they put it back together, but it never has healed right. Eric to this day still wears a brace just so he can maintain his arm or his hands, extending even a little bit. Now, they did kind of save his arm, but he can't throw football and baseball and that stuff like he used to. But really, his true injury is that his head hit the trees at 45 miles an hour. And when it hit the trees at 45 miles an hour, his mom told me that it fractured his skull in several different spots, and it caused very, very severe head trauma. So much that it caused Eric to fall into a coma. He was in a coma for almost a year. Now, I don't know if you could even imagine this, but I certainly want you to for a second. So Eric's girlfriend, Eric's teammates, his family, everybody had to sit into the room with him as he laid here. In this image right here, it's why he was at a hospital. He had been moved from DeKalb Medical over to Shepherd Center. And right here, he can barely breathe. He's struggling with everything. And if you notice, he's foaming at the mouth. Anyways, he's in a full-fledged coma. They're waiting for him to die each day. They don't know if he's going to live, if he's going to die. They're preparing for the worst. They even move him out of the bed. See, on the bed, he was on a bed of ice because his temperatures ran around 104 degrees because he was fighting off infections. But they would strap him to a chair. But even though when he's in the chair, he's still in the coma. Then when they go to rehab him, during rehab sessions, if you'll notice right here, they blink stuff in his eyes, they put smells underneath his nose. They just want him to react. The problem is he doesn't react, not for a long time. Now, please understand, his mom, his dad, his brothers, his sister, his girlfriend, his teammates, they all were waiting each day for Eric just to come awake. You know what? After a long, long time, that gets really hard to watch, I imagine. You know, at one point in time, a particular hospital had kind of resigned on Eric. They said that he needed to be stuck in a nursing home and he was not going to get any better. So they put him into a nursing home. After about 5 days, his mom could not handle it. He was only 21 years old. They hated seeing him in there, and they begged and they pleaded with other hospitals to please accept him. Scottish Rite in Atlanta took Eric in. And Eric did slowly emerge from his coma. They took great care of him. And they worked with him very hard. He did a lot of rehabilitation, but during that time, you have to understand, when Eric woke up, it wasn't the same, was it? And so everyone can understand this too, right from you. You do understand and remember exactly what life was like before, and you understand how complicated it is now, right? Now, Eric has an extraordinarily huge passion. All right, I have known the guy for 8 years now. I understand and I see what he does with his daily life. I know that when he was able to finally slowly come out of the coma and he was rehabbing, he worked out really hard. It's happened from 16 years. He still works out every single day of his life. He has a gym out in his garage. He's out there and he's working out. He might not be lifting as much weight, but he definitely is trying. And, for a long time, they didn't know if he'd be able to use a wheelchair. He can use a wheelchair, now he can use a walker. He can climb steps. He can get dressed. He can do a lot of things. But because of his injuries, unfortunately, and as much as Eric hates it, he does have to have some people around him sometimes. He can't be left for long periods of time because his injuries have slowed his whole body up. So if he's drinking a Mountain Dew and it's really cold, it can cause him to choke. And if he chokes, you have to know how to help him so that he can, recover, or otherwise he would die. So he is faced with huge difficulties. Now he only has a couple of ways that he can get his message out. And so I want you to see this right here. It's really important for Eric to show because of the limited ability he has of conveying his message right now. And so I want you to make sure you see this. This is actually some pictures that were collected over the years. Eric wants to kind of share what he was like before. Now they've picked a song from Garth Brooks called "It's Still My Life," but it is a very important segment for him to share with you.
Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above. For a moment, all the world was right. How could I have known that you'd ever say goodbye? And I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end, the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain that I had to miss. couldn't miss the pain that I had to miss the day.
So Eric definitely wants everyone to know, right, Eric, that it is still your life, and he does do the best that he can. He does a lot with his life. He's very inspirational. Even though the mistakes I made in my life, Eric befriended me. He also introduced me to his whole family, especially his sister. His sister and I became best friends before I was ever released out of prison. When I got out of prison, she and I, we got married October 25th, 2009. And Eric, he was my best man. He has an amazing sister. My wife is incredible. Her name is Jennifer. And throughout all of this, Eric has always wanted me to share some other personal things with you because it's important to him as it is to me. He carries a picture on his iPad that he always wants to share with people, so it's easier if we blow it up. But since I was released, Jennifer and I, we started a family. Right here is Madison Ray. She's almost 3 years old now, so she actually has the pigtails and all that other stuff. So then Zachary Daniel, you don't have to tell me, I already know he's got a big head, but he's really cute, he's cool. But Madison Ray, she's super sassy like her mom, and I think that's like a whole girl thing. But Zachary, we named him after my dad. We called him Zachary Daniel because my dad's name is Daniel Sandy. And man, I miss my dad. I wish that he was here for this part of my life. I wish I hadn't messed up for so many years. I wish I would have not made that choice when I was 22, but I did. I do know that he'd be proud of me of what I'm doing now with my life. I just wish I hadn't waited so long to make certain changes. In here you can tell Zachary's starting to grow into his head. He's got a few more years. But I'm going to tell you, that's my love. That's my life. It's my family. Eric, he's the most special uncle they could ever ask for. He even has a certain way he communicates with both of them. It's really neat to watch. It's not like he talks on his iPad. They both jump up in his lap. They talk to him. They call him Unky. Unky the monkey is what his nickname is. And they really get along. And it's really neat. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm very concerned about some things. One is that the day's going to come where they're going to find out what I did. And I hope that neither one of them ever think of me differently because they find out that I made a dumb choice when I was 22. Now, I do everything for them, and I'm with them a lot, and I spend lots of quality time with them because that's my life. I love my kids. And I don't want them to ever think of me differently because of something I did in my life. I'm also worried about when and if I ever get to drive again because I'll have to have this ignition interlock system put in my car. It will be a huge privilege to take them around anywhere, to go to the park with them, all that stuff, be able to drive them to the doctor's office. Simple things. But at the same time, I'm going to have to blow in a breathalyzer to start my car in front of them and blow it as I drive along the road. But those are things that are out of my control now. Now, on a brighter note, on something different, I think that they're not going to think of me differently. I believe that. As long as I do what I'm supposed to do as a dad, they're going to hold me to that. Now, Eric over here, on the other hand, he has a whole nother agenda if I get a license. And you got to understand, he and I, we're pretty boring when it comes down to it. I mean, we go and we share our stories, but other than that, for instance, how we got here, you got to wonder that. We're over in Atlanta. How in the world did we get to South Georgia here? Well, as we do everywhere, we rolled around with his mom. And I hate to tell you, at 36 and 37 years old, when you're cruising with your mom everywhere, it just ain't that cool anymore. But thank goodness she's staying outside right now, right? I don't even have a ride. But we both love our families, and thankful for it. But Eric is hoping at some point in time I do get a license back. I don't blame him. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but if it does, you know, Eric has made some special requests. Now, he loves, we go to the movies and hang out sometimes. We'll take a taxi. It's not like where we live. We don't live right in Atlanta. I live in Conyers outside. It's not like we have a bunch of ways to get up there. We are secluded to some degree. But we will go to the movies sometime or get dropped off. We'll go hang out or whatever. But he likes to go out to restaurants too. And so he's asked me and made this special request that I take him out to this restaurant. And I'm going to tell you, before I even get here, I did not tell him I was taking him. I just said that, you know, he's open, whatever he wants to ask me, I'll try to help him out. So I don't. Do you want to tell them? Well, you've already like typed it out and everything, so you're ready to let them know. Okay, so this is like his wish list. So hold on.
Hooters.
Oh, Hooters. Anyways, it must be the wings, right? Right. Okay. So. What I want to kind of say is we wanted to share some of our personality with you. I certainly would do anything for Eric. He's really special, and he uplifts me every day. And I just hope that throughout today's journey that we just took you on, that you understand that we do truly care for everyone here. We wouldn't be pouring out everything that we have inside and sharing it with you if we did not care. And Eric and I, we're trying to accomplish a lot of things. Since I got out of prison, Eric and I have united together. In 2010, I started an organization called Enduring Regret. It obviously goes to the theme of what I'm doing here. Part of this organization that I've been building on, Eric had made a special request that someday he wanted his story to be featured in a book, and he had been really hoping someone would help him out. Well, I finally took to it, and I went ahead and spent from 2011 until late of 2012 writing a book, and I finished it. And so Eric and I now are using this book to distribute to colleges and high schools everywhere that you can possibly think of. We can't go and share our stories everywhere, and as we get older it becomes a little more difficult, so we wanted to have another tool. And then I also asked that we do a documentary, so I got involved with a production company in Atlanta called Extreme Video, and we produced a documentary that could help share and relay our message. And so these are some big things that are happening in our lives right now. Now, for me, though, these accomplishments, they come with a huge problem. Okay? For the rest of my life, all these milestones that I make in my life, I hope you understand that there is always a black cloud that's hanging over me. That black cloud represents what I did in my past. It represents me being in prison, the label I wear, being a convicted felon, all this stuff. And so it's like every time we do something that's really neat and special to us, I turn around and I have that stupid black cloud that's over me. And I can't get rid of it. And I can't get rid of it because of the choice I made when I was 22. That's not going to prevent me from moving forward, but it just makes it really hard in life. And so I know that Eric and I both are hoping that when you're moving forward now, that you value what you have, that you do something special with your life, and don't do something where you can be caught forever with a black cloud that follows you no matter where you go. And you do that by making the right choices. And so with that said, Eric and I, we are very grateful for you all listening to our stories. I think one of the big things is if you're at a party next time and y'all are hanging out or whatever's going on, if one of your friends is messing up, please don't be scared to say something to them. That one thing that you intervene in their life and you say something, I promise you, from Eric and I, we're guaranteeing you could easily be saving their life. With that said, we wish you the best. Take care and God bless. Thank you for listening.